And it looks like the recording started on its own. Excellent. Welcome everyone. This is the 2023 iteration of the Community Policing Ad Hoc. Thank you all for being here. Let's see, I am Commissioner Jesse Shea. I hope that we can go through a round of introductions. We have a lot of new faces and a lot of old faces. It's very good to see you all. I know that Commissioner Harbin Forte is not able to join us tonight. I am waiting to hear back from Commissioner Howell, and I think we all got the email from our Deputy City Administrator, Joe DeVries. He unfortunately is on a flight, but he left us some comments. Why don't I start with Emeritus Jose Dorado?
I'm glad to be identified as one of the old faces. Someone said Dorado, former police commissioner and proud member of the African American Latino Action Alliance and the Latino Task Force. Good evening, everybody.
Thank you. I'm going to go clockwise on my screen. So next I have up Mariano Contreras.
Mariano Contreras, I've been in Oakland since 1975. I am a member of the Latino Task Force, and I represent the Latino Task Force in the Coalition for Police Accountability as a steering committee member. And I'm proud to serve on this commission. Thank you.
Thank you. Next I have up Mike Nisperos.
I am Mike Nisperos. I'm also a former member of the Oakland Police Commission and also have one of the other old faces. Good to see everybody.
Likewise, thank you. Next I have Lieutenant Toribio.
Hi, good evening. Lieutenant Steve Toribio. I'm the BFO2 or East Oakland Day Watch Commander. On the weekends, I was tasked with going over, or rather putting together this latest draft, which I'll be going over with the group, and hopefully we can all come to a consensus and fix up anything that I may have screwed up in this revision, but I think we'll be all right.
Thank you for your work. Former Police Chief Reginald Lyle. Can't hear you, sir.
Sorry.
There it is.
I appreciate, how do I say this? Respectfully. Reginald Lyles is enough for me. I'm a deacon at Allen Temple Baptist Church. I'm raised in Oakland Tech graduate, and I got an old face too. So that's enough.
I see someone who is listed as panelist. I am relatively certain that is our Chief of Staff, Kelly Yoon. So I will go to Mr. Farmer, Omar.
Good evening. I'm a commissioner on the SSOC.
Thank you, sir. And now we have Deputy Chief Beer.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening, Commissioner. I'm Deputy Chief James Beer. I've been with the Oakland Police Department for 26 years. I live here in Oakland. I have 3 boys, raising them, and they're going to Oakland schools. I'm the Deputy Chief of Bureau of Field Services 1. I got kind of brought into this because when it got in front of the chief's desk, there was some MOU issues. So I'm here kind of to be the conduit in case there needs to be any change or coordination. And that's why we also added Sergeant Manguy and Lieutenant Kim to kind of help Lieutenant Toribio out since Lieutenant Thomason is away on vacation. But pleasure to meet everyone. I know Mr. Dorado and I have been in contact pretty frequently in the last few months, and I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
Last but not least, Sergeant Manguy, Lieutenant Kim.
Hello, I'm Sergeant Alan Manguy. I am currently a community resource sergeant for BFO 1. I've been with the department for 16 years, and I've been with CROs for about 3 years now. And then with me, I have Acting Lieutenant Eric Kim.
Hey, everybody, Eric Kim. I was the supervisor for the CROs for the last 4 years. Recently got moved to the Violent Crime Operations Center as an acting lieutenant. But I still work very closely with the CROs on many projects. So thank you for having me here. Also been with the department about 16 years.
Lots of experience on this ad hoc. Thank you all for being here. Okay, so thank you all for being here. The reason why we are here is, of course, the Police Commission and this ad hoc and the Police Commission passed a version of what was at the time DGO 15-01. We had taken input from community members, from OPD. Our liaison at the time was Lieutenant Febel. I think Sergeant Johnson was also with us for a good amount of time, and we came up with a draft. The commission passed it. Unfortunately, the commission had some staff changes and some staff turnover, so that draft did not go to the city council. At some point, we figured that out, and then I had a conversation with then, oh goodness, Lieutenant. I can't remember who it was at this point, but we had a discussion. I conferred with some of the other commissioners, and we thought we'd let the department have a look at it and let it go through the MOU, not the MOU process, but to sort of take a look and make sure it was what, if anything, could go through, could not go through from an MOU perspective, as opposed to from a policy perspective. And so that is why we have, then it went to Lieutenant Toribio, and that is why we now have the two versions that I sent to you, as well as a document that I created to sort of highlight what the differences were, so that we could all have them and sort of have a discussion about them. Any questions before we go forward, overarching, before I have Lieutenant Toribio or Sergeant Manguy or Lieutenant Kim take us through the policy? DC Beer, feel free to talk. We're small enough of a group where you can just jump in.
Thanks, Commissioner. So just right off the bat, our intent was to keep it as closely possible to what it was drafted first with, and ultimately the MOU conflict really kind of goes with the staffing issue, and I'm sure Lieutenant Toribio will go over it, but basically the length of CRO committing to stay in one area is a violation of the MOU with the OPOA. So that was the biggest red flag for the chief. And then just to kind of clear it up, and I apologize, this will be a departmental general order. It's not going to be a training bulletin. So what we'll do is once we get consensus on everything, we'll work with the policy and publications unit to make sure that it's actually in the proper format for a departmental general order going forward. That's just what I have to add, Commissioner.
Much appreciated. Okay. Anybody else before Lieutenant Toribio takes us through? Omar Farmer.
Hey, just wanted to ask Deputy Chief Beer a quick question, because I'm pretty sure that I'm aware of in the MOU where it talks about the CROs. I don't have it in front of me. I'm sure you know better than me, but doesn't it just say that it gives the flexibility to use CROs in the different positions? Like that's why they augment patrol, for example. It's not necessarily like prohibiting them from not being solely dedicated to CRO duties. Isn't that correct, or is that wrong?
No, you're 100% correct. The conflict with the MOU is that they stay in that assignment, and that they can't leave the CRO assignment. We can't force a member of the Oakland Police Department to stay in an assignment longer than they want to. So there's like a cap on like how far out you can be out of patrol, and everything as far as like them staying within that was fine, but we can't force a CRO to stay in a CRO assignment. They had the option to go back to patrol before, say, if it was a 5-year cat, like you wanted them to commit to 5 years or 6 years, we can't force them to stay in an assignment according to the MOU. But as far as, yeah, what you said is correct, but that's not the conflict.
Okay, got it. No, I think I understand now. Thanks.
You're welcome.
I saw whoever is panelists raise their hand. Speak now, forever hold your peace, and good to
How are we
see
doing, Mr.
Commissioner
Shape?
Howell.
Lieutenant Febble here. I did not realize that was me. I thought because I used the link that it would have my name. So thank you for having me, everybody. I'll introduce myself quickly. Special Operations Section Commander, over a decade of experience in CRO.
Thank you for being here. Much appreciated. Great for continuity as well. You were with us from the beginning. Commissioner Howell, you mind introducing yourself for all the faces here?
Yeah, Rudy Howell, Commissioner. That's about it. Yeah.
All right. Thank you. Let's see. Nothing else, Lieutenant Toribio, why don't you take us through?
Thanks. Yeah. Apologies on that document that is the latest OPD revision, which is in a training bulletin format. It is a Department General Order. It'll be formatted as such. Hopefully, maybe the next time we reconvene. Thank you also, Commissioner Shea, for putting the document that has the changes. And I actually think that's probably the best way to go about it. If we can go through the changes and talk about the changes, and then any changes that we have here, I can incorporate back into the doc and then push that out for people to review kind of in one document. That'll be good. But I'm open if anybody else has another way of going about the review for this.
I remember this group being a group that liked large font. And so maybe why don't you take us through actually the new policy so that we all have eyes and can talk about it together, and I'll keep track of what changes were made and flag them.
Got it. And I think
I've flagged them sort of in a back and forth type of thing.
Okay. And I think that in the training bulletin doc that I have, I inserted comments that explained some of the changes. I hope I got them all, but I'm sure I didn't. I'm sure I missed something. So I'll share that document. Okay. Is that working for folks?
No.
No? Okay. Give me a second. Okay. Should be up now, hopefully.
I'm gonna do a font check. If you could you zoom in a little bit more? Maybe you could just read the comments. So I don't think we need the comments.
Zoom in more on the actual doc.
Yes.
That. Okay. I may slide over to read the the comment I made to kind of help guide me. I'm not working, unfortunately, on a dual monitor right now. I'm working just straight on a laptop, so my screen real estate is a little lacking. Okay, so this again, it's formatted in the manner of an OPD training bulletin, but it'll be more in like an outline format, which is consistent with our general orders. So it starts with this introduction, which will no longer be present when it's in the general order format, which defines what a training bulletin is. You go to our departmental core values and mission. And I made a note that this is language that's more consistent with our present values and mission statement. So it's shorter than what was listed in the original, but this is more reflective of what is present and like other policy and what the department is pushing.
Let's take a pause right now so everyone can have a moment and read it.
Yep.
And I would welcome any thoughts on this particular paragraph, recognizing, of course, that this is this something that you got from other policies, or like an amalgamation, or
I think I got it
straight
from
copy and paste.
from the website. Yeah, I copy and paste from the website or some other department literature. And if I can please make a recommendation for any suggestions, if you can, instead of raising your hand, if you could just speak up. Again, I have my screen zoomed just to consume the entire document. And like Commissioner Shea was saying, I think we're small enough where people can just kind of speak up. So if you raise your hand, I apologize if I don't see it, but please feel free to just speak up.
Hi, I'm driving. Is it possible for someone to read it aloud? Is that too much?
Welcome, Pastor Jackie. No, I don't think that's unreasonable. I'm sure we can do that. Lieutenant Toribio.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you. Good
absolutely.
evening, everyone.
Hi, good evening. So the first component of this policy lists the departmental core values and mission, which states the department has adopted community-oriented policing as its operational philosophy to institutionalize the core values of fairness, integrity, respect, service, and teamwork. That's the acronym FIRST. The mission of the department is to provide police service focused on public safety and the sanctity of life, to hold ourselves accountable to a high standard of conduct, efficiency, and efficacy, and to promote mutual respect between the department and the communities of Oakland. So that's the first component, the departmental core values and mission.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that.
Sure. Is there any feedback regarding this section from the panel?
Yeah, what was there that was changed back to this?
I got you. I'm gonna copy and paste it. I think what happened was that Lieutenant Toribio broke out our original first section into two sections. Put the departmental core values at the very top, and then took a good amount of what we had as our introduction into the philosophy of community policing. So what I will do there is no chat function. Lovely. That is an oversight. I apologize. Let me see if I can figure out how to solve this. Oh, that's not what I want to do.
So the department mission and goals for community policing in the prior that was approved by the police commission. There were two paragraphs that were moved from that section to the community police philosophy of community policing section. And I'm that sounds right. And I'm going off of Commissioner Shea's changes document.
The first paragraph, which was deleted, and I think is kind of the alternative that we had, was the mission of the Oakland Police Department is to promote and protect public safety while respecting the dignity and rights of all, including the most vulnerable. To achieve this mission, the department's goals must have the community's well-being and support at the heart of all law enforcement activities, and must be grounded on collaborative partnerships with Oakland residents, non-law enforcement city agencies and departments, community-based organizations, faith-based organizations, businesses, and neighborhood councils. So I would say
Commissioner
that
Shea, is that the portion that shows up in the next section you're saying?
no, that is the portion that was the first paragraph in the original policy that is no longer in the newest draft.
So the sentiments of that paragraph that you just read are not present anywhere in this document?
No, I think they are in phrased differently in the latter version of the core values and mission. And I think that's echoed as well in other components, such as in the area of the philosophy of community policing. The verbiage has changed though.
I'll wait till we get to that portion. Thank you.
Yeah, I want to say we're trying to change the culture of the department. We're trying to move in a different direction, are we not?
Mhm.
Well, then we can't keep saying the same thing that was said previously and expect a change. That seems illogical to me.
I think that I don't disagree with the fact that we should obviously be under perpetual change and constantly evaluating what we're doing and the lens through which we're seeing things in order to be accommodating to the city that we're serving. I do believe that is covered in this paragraph that states that. Obviously, I'm open, and I think the department is open to reinterpretation of the values. I do think there is something to be said about maintaining some type of consistency in how that's presented throughout our documents, so we don't have different general orders that kind of state something that is different. I think it's important that we draft a message that conveys the sentiment that we want to convey, and then be consistent in the application of how we put that in our documentation. Not to say that's not subject to being updated, but I do think that consistency is important.
So
Yeah.
the department's core values and mission, they're not going to change because this document's another department. The department's mission still states this is the mission. But if you want that verbiage in it from the first paragraph that was in the department's mission, I mean, I don't see a problem with bringing that down to the philosophy community policing, because that's still what this DGO is about, right? So instead of that first sentence of that first paragraph saying that the mission of the Oakland Police Department is to promote public safety, we could say under the philosophy of community policing, in addition to the Oakland Police Department's mission, we are here to promote public safety and then you can continue on if you want that verbiage in there.
If I may, I remember having a long conversation around how we wanted to introduce the concept of community policing in this policy. And we wanted to make sure that community was always involved in that or addressed as being one of the drivers. And not only because we want to, make that sentiment or message, to get across, but also because we want buy-in from the community, from residents of Oakland. And if I was to just read this one paragraph, as opposed to the one that we agreed on, the one that Commissioner Shea read, that was after a long discussion where we felt that we wanted to ensure that residents understood the sentiment of community policing. So I'm in favor, I'm in favor of the section that we agreed on, or the paragraph that Commissioner Shea read. Thank you.
I don't think we can do the same things we've done in the past and expect a different outcome. And I don't think consistency means nothing to me if we've been consistently at odds with the community. I don't want that consistency. I want a different consistency. Now this is not to offend anybody in uniform, but we're here because what has been interpreted, or if I could use a theological term, exegeted from what is written here, hasn't been community-oriented policing.
So I think that to respond to that, I think that it seems it's more of a manner in performance or execution or the technicalities of the actual policy, versus a conflict in the mission statement. If something has been done that isn't working, I think that's where the nuts and bolts of this policy comes into effect in terms of what the role is of the community resource officer and how projects are managed and the inner workings with the councils that they're a part of on their beat. I think that is where that this would be best addressed, looking at the changes and seeing if what we're asking our CROs to do really meets up to those expectations. The mission statement, again, it's broader and it's for the department as a whole. And I do believe that the principles that are covered here do cover it. I have no problem. I don't think the department has a problem with adding additional language, whether it be in this section or the next. But to address the concern about things needing to change, I think that hopefully we'll touch on those things as we get to the actual roles and responsibilities of the CROs.
I agree with what you said, Lieutenant, but I also agree with Reggie and the expression that was originally read by Jesse, I think was profound. And I'm speaking as an old rhetoric major. I thought that was very well written, and it may not be consistent with what is typically found in departmental core values and mission, but perhaps it should be the new statement of what department core values and mission. And it's a new statement that's been suggested to you by members of the community in collaboration with you. So I would very much like to see what was taken out to be put back in. Just my 2 cents.
Yeah,
So
so listening to everybody here, I appreciate it, but I think if you want to, so this DGO is not going to change the core mission of the Oakland Police Department, but it's to craft specifically for community policing. I'm okay with keeping the mission statement in relation to the vision and goals for community policing, but you're gonna have to change that departmental core values and mission, because that in itself would be too broad, because that's encompassing all of how the department sees things, and that's the chief's guidance on what the core values and the mission is. So I'm totally okay with going back to the old, not the old, but the previously submitted mission statement related specifically for community policing. So again, the only thing that needs to be changed, and we can change it back to what was stated before, but just take away departmental core values and mission, because that over encompasses all of the department, and you can change it to back to the department's mission, vision, and goals for community policing, which is specific to this departmental general order. So I'm good with making that change back.
Lieutenant Toribio, I'll ask that you do 2 things. I'll ask that you take a look at that first paragraph, because now that I'm looking at it, it kind of has 2 parts. It has, number 1, what the mission is, and number 2, how to achieve that mission. And that's not quite a mission statement. Is there some way we can incorporate at least the second sentence in which, and then the first, which kind of gets to having the department's goals, having the community's well-being, or maybe community policing officer programs, the community policing programs goals is having the community's well-being and support at the heart of all law enforcement activities. Get that sentence in there.
That was the second sentence, and sorry, the second sentence, and also which one?
So from the original policy, the second sentence we could try to put into the philosophy of community policing. And the first sentence, we could see if we could incorporate that in some way that could keep both or not. I think it would help to see it on the page so that we can really take a look at it. Where I think there's a way to get it all there, and I don't think we're necessarily disagreeing, or I kind of see a way to move forward, to move forward with everything.
Yeah, I agree. I made those notes to be pushed out for review in the next draft.
And then Lieutenant Toribio, when we create the next draft, can you just make sure you get with the policy and publication? So when we submit the next draft, it'll be in the format of the departmental general order.
Yeah, of course, Chief. Got it. Are we ready to move to the philosophy of community policing section?
Taking a second. I think so. I
Okay.
see Pastor Jackie unmuting.
No, I was just unmuting to say yes, because I'd like to hear some of the sentiments that were lost in the first mission statement are reflected in the philosophy.
Okay, I will read this then. This is the philosophy of community policing. Community policing is the affirmed public policy strategy to achieve the department's mission. It is a policing model in which officers empower communities through building collaborative, transparent, honest, and trusting relationships with the communities they serve. It is a customer service approach to policing, which embraces community-led and community-directed problem solving, and where officers are seen as part of the community rather than separate from it. It places a high value on problem-solving responses that are preventative in nature and not dependent on the use of the criminal justice system. A successful community policing program requires that department members be trained in the history of policing in Oakland and engage in a restorative justice-based dialogue with community members in a manner that allows for continuous adjustments to department practices, procedures, and policies. A successful community policing policy also requires that department members receive training in cultural diversity and competency, active listening, and effective community engagement. Finally, a successful community policing program requires the department's commitment to using de-escalation strategies when responding to issues arising in the communities. The community policing problem-solving model carries with it a commitment to implementing responses, rigorously evaluating effectiveness, and subsequently reporting the results of priorities and projects in ways that will benefit the community, the department, and policing practices in general. Community policing is not just a strategy that reduces crime. Community policing improves the overall quality of life in our neighborhoods for all residents. So that is the introductory section for the philosophy of community policing. And there's this then a subsection of purpose and community policing and problem solving. But any questions, comments, or concerns regarding these introductory paragraphs to the philosophy of community policing?
To highlight the changes, those 3 paragraphs that were just read were part of the original policy. I think there was a footnote. I don't know what happened to the footnotes, and I can't even read what the footnotes are now at this point. So I'll try to find something. I'll try to get them to you if you don't have them. The one change is a paragraph, or sorry, is a sentence that was in the middle of paragraph 2.
Yeah. So that I'm sorry.
Yeah. Go
Oh,
ahead.
you want me to read? Yeah. So that read, some adjustments will repair the historical harm done by policing in Oakland, mitigate unintended consequences of such practices, procedures, and policies, and avoid further harm by eliminating the use of inappropriate practices, procedures, and policies. So looking back, I think the reason why I removed this, and I figured this would be a topic of discussion, is because I think the verbiage of this, it sounded a bit too overbearing on other policies, if I recall correctly, of like how I'm reading in this, particularly the latter part of the sentence, eliminating the use of inappropriate practices, procedures, and policies. I didn't quite, I I think that as I was reading that, it made it sound like this policy kind of had its fingers in, or an ability to change or alter or remove other policies and procedures. And I think there's a separate kind of method in place in order to evaluate other policies. Each policy has like its own like evaluation cycle. And so that's why this was removed.
And
Commissioner
ultimately, those
Shea, I know the
policies will go to
purpose.
Police Commission.
I'm sorry, Commissioner Shea?
I'm here.
Okay, I know that the purpose of this meeting was for us to go through this document. Will there be opportunity post this meeting? And again, this is only me because I'm driving, for us to send written submissions or perhaps do some wordsmithing once this meeting is ended, or is this it?
There will be, because we're going to see another version of this at some point in the future. So you'll have, I don't know. I think between I think a minimum of 2 to 3 weeks before the next meeting, and then the meeting at that next time. Yeah, there is.
Okay, and so it does capture most of what we wrote. I think part of what I'm reacting to is the part that we really wanted to stress is the part that was taken out. And so I think I need to ask, did I enter in with a mistaken understanding of what we were doing? When we were meeting, it was my understanding that community policing was the strategy for the entire Oakland Police Department. And so I think we had our discussions, and the written document that came out of that understanding. I think what also came out of that understanding was that the community should be central, and moreover, that phrase, the most vulnerable in the community, was intentional. And so I would like the opportunity to see if there's a way to synthesize and reintroduce those in a way that does not seem overbearing to other policies, although I'm kind of unclear as to what that means. Because in light of where we are as a department, I think I'm aligned with Deacon Lyles in thinking that we do need to introduce some change, and maybe that change needs to happen across all of the policies as they come up for review. So I just want to make sure if there's an opportunity to submit something else in writing that we can entertain that. So I'll leave that there. But thank you so much for reading that aloud.
DC.
Thanks, Commissioner. Yeah, no, definitely we can work with getting the vulnerable population back in there, but one policy can't override all other policies. So I don't think that's going to be one where we can put in here that we're going to basically squash other policies by creating this policy. All policies, when they come up to review, will be subject to review and ultimately the police commission. But we can't create a policy about community policing that states it could negate another policy. So that's something they'd have to work on, but definitely the vulnerable population. Yeah, I think that's definitely something that could be in here.
Excuse me, sir,
So
but the negating of other policies are your words. We never thought it was negating any policy.
Right.
We thought it was the proper strategy to use to involve the community, no matter what the policy happens to be. No matter if it's a policy on sexual assaults, a policy on animal control, or a policy on traffic, or whatever, the community and their wishes and desires and fears have to be known and incorporated into the strategy to ameliorate whatever the situation is. It can't be from the perspective of, well, we're looking for brevity, we want to be consistent for what we've always had. No, that's why we're here. We're here to say what we always had needs to be reviewed and changed. Status quo is not getting it done.
Yeah,
Can
well,
I
point well
just-
taken. I hear that, but again, we have to adhere to policies and laws. So each policy has to be looked at and evaluated on its own right. So
But
again,
no,
this is to specifically go towards.
nothing we said was illegal. Nothing we've said in the
didn't say that.
policy, let me finish. Nothing we said in the policy was a violation of the Constitution or the laws of federal laws or state laws. None of that. It was just a way of looking at perspective. What do we value? And so we were gathered together to think about this thing, and we did. And we met over and over and over and over, and we produced a document. And then a couple of folks read it and said, oh, well, that's negating other policies. No, it's not. It's a strategy.
So I am looking
Well,
at
I
the
never said you guys
screen.
violated the law. What I said was the police department is bound to follow policy and law. Again, each policy has to be individually assessed, evaluated, and then if there's changes, it has to be brought in front of the police commission to be reviewed and then forwarded from there.
That's why we're
So-
here.
So I
No.
am seeing the language on the screen. And I'm going to take a moment of privilege here. Excuse me for the people who have their hands up. And I do see that this particular language has what I would describe as a few clauses to it, right? And I think perhaps what the department might be focusing on is the portion that says eliminating the use of inappropriate practices, procedures, and policies. Tell me if I'm wrong, or is it the entire sentence?
No, that's,
I'm 100% in agreement with you, Commissioner.
yeah.
Okay.
And so I think that, I understand that's not and I'm glad that's why we're having this discussion. It doesn't appear to have been the intention in the implementation of that language to be over controlling on any other policy. I think the reason why I brought it up is just because to my eyes, that's how it reads. So, if we can redraft to perhaps express its intention more explicitly to remove that interpretation, when it's read, then we put it back in and we move forward.
Let me take Mr. Farmer, who's been waiting very patiently.
Hey, actually, I think let Mariano go first because I think I want to ask something a little bit different than what we're talking about now. You might want to comment on.
Much appreciated.
Okay,
Thank
thank you. Yeah, I think that the comments are being addressed to the policies. And I think the focus needs to be on unintended consequences of such practices and procedures. I think that is the focus of this sentence. I understand about, policies need, that one policy cannot change other policies. But on face value there, I don't think that, it's raising anything that is, well, it obviously did because you folks in the police department saw that and are saying that, one policy cannot change another policy without going through proper procedures. But I believe that the intention of this sentence here was on practices and procedures. Thank you.
Perfect. I 100% agree with that.
Let's see. Since I think we're still on this thread, I'll ask for Mr. Dorado, Jose, anything to add on this one?
Did Omar have Omar, you want to go ahead and?
No, you can go first.
Pretty patient. Go ahead and go.
Okay, well, my question might be a little bit different, but I wanted to ask OPD, anyone from OPD, how would you describe the cultural diversity and competency training that you received that's outlined in that second paragraph?
You want to take it, Lieutenant Cerebri, or do you want me to?
No, let me reread. I'm rereading this second paragraph here. Now you're asking me my
Right.
personal comments on the status of this training.
How would you describe the training that you received? Like, what is it? You guys receive presentations, or is this some sort of
Yeah, it's
talks that you have with your supervisors. It's not official training, or how would you describe it?
no, it's evolved. I have a narrower window into the police academy, but I believe there's an entire block on cultural diversity. And active listening goes into like adult learning and whatnot, and they do have a community policing block. And then every 12 to 18 months, there's a cycle of continual professional training, which all the officers and sergeants have to go through. And if I'm not mistaken, there is a diversity block built in. And then, well, I was just promoted not too long ago, so I can't speak to the command retreats and whether or not there's a block there. But I know in the academy, in the officer and sergeant continual training, there are blocks. They're there, and there are classroom blocks. I'm not quite sure who teaches that block or what presenters they have. I don't recall.
We also have Project Reset that's being trained throughout the department from all ranks, from officers all the way through. That also is very heavy on procedural justice, active listening. They continuously have de-escalation training, as well as briefings from the community policing, in addition to the community resource officers. So there's quite a few trainings that's mandated as well as offered.
Sorry, I'm catching the last section of this too, to touch on Chief Beer and de-escalation strategy. So our use of force policy, it's relatively new. There was department-wide training that went out, and a major component of that use of force is reliance on de-escalation tactics to avoid the intrusion of force on an individual. And just me personally, as the watch commander for Bureau of Field Operations 2, on the weekends during the day, I do weekly training with the watch, with First Watch, and the topics, they range everything from field tactics to communication to care for property. But those trainings also include some reality-based training scenarios in which de-escalation is one of the primary objectives and its implementation in the scenario.
Okay. Hey, no, that's great. Thank you for letting me know about all that. I'm just curious, do you all do anything training-wise that's, I guess, related to the cultural diversity and competency training that's specific to training officers on the Black and Brown history of Oakland?
Yes, actually, that's a big portion of Project Reset, where we go into the history of Oakland itself as a city, as well as the police department, and basically the history of the police department and its interactions with the community, going back, to the early 1900s into the 30s and 40s, and the beginning of basically the mistrust and how the police are viewed by the community, community members of color, and that's not only is that a period of instruction, but then there's open dialogue and conversations about it, and then they're provided with actually like homework type assignments to kind of take a deeper dive into it.
Okay, Project Reset. Is that something that was created in the wake of the Instagram racist and misogynistic scandal? Or no? Is there something new that came after that? That's my last question.
I don't know. I don't know if it's specifically tied because of that investigation. I do know it did follow that the Project Reset came about after that investigation took place. But I think a lot of it has to do with equity outside of the department and within the department, and it's trying to, he has the name Project Reset, so it's to also give the officers a voice, and then to have the officers become one with the community and understand the history and how we got to this point right now in the Oakland Police Department, and how we can fix historical injustices going forward, and how we can make it better, not just for the community, but for the officers as well. So it might have had a role in it. I don't know. I wasn't part of that, the core group of people that came about to, as a result of whatever happened from that Instagram investigation. But I have been part of the Project Reset development and implementation, and I've attended it myself.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome.
Set.
Commissioner Farmer.
So I wanted to go back to the deleted verbiage. I think if you look at it from the standpoint as we did, that we wanted to emphasize that the history of policing in Oakland has to be addressed in such a way that it's repaired, and that repair is obviously an ongoing process. And so it's those repairs, big and small, are the adjustments that are being highlighted in the verbiage. It's not so much a question of trying to put language in there that conflicts with the process for policy changes. It's more so the flow of the feeling that you have to acknowledge the history, and it has to be a process by which the Oakland Police Department actually engages in wholeheartedly. And that's why I like the word of restorative justice, because that's what it is, restoring the justice within Oakland by the actions, by virtue of the actions and the adjustments made on an ongoing basis in the relationship between the community and the police. So if it helps with the question of this verbiage affecting in some sort of way the cycle of policy change, then perhaps saying avoid further harm by helping to eliminate the use of inappropriate practices, procedures, and policies. So it's not saying that this verbiage will lead to a conflict with other policy changes, but it would, these adjustments that we talk about, the acknowledgement of the history of policing in Oakland, those adjustments, big and small, will be helping to affect change in terms of practices, procedures, and policies. So I hope that helps bring about a differing perspective, because that was our perspective going in, and that's why the language was put in the way it was. So I'd like to see it remain with the addition of helping to eliminate, acknowledging that in fact it's not trying in any way to supplant or substitute for processes for policy change in other areas.
I see Lieutenant Toribio taking notes. I'll let him finish before I take Mr. Lyles.
All set.
General Lyles.
I think that if we can't admit where we are, if we can't admit to the history of Oakland and its residents and its police department, where there's wrong on the community side and on the police side, if we can't admit that, if we can't look at it, we cannot repair it. We can ignore the problem and it just festers and festers under the surface and breaks out again.
Sorry, I clicked too many times. I accidentally muted you, sir. Mr. Lyles, yeah, I think I accidentally, just for the last 10 seconds. My apologies. Sorry, I did something. I am so very sorry. How do we undo this? I can't undo it. I need you to unmute yourself.
Okay,
There
All
it
right.
is. Sorry about that. Very sorry. My apologies.
All right, I'll go back to where I was. If the Oakland Police Department cannot admit to the fact that there's been historical harm to the people that they serve, doesn't mean the people who are in office now and wearing the uniform now did any of it, but it was done. And there's a litany of things. And it's not every officer, but it's a percentage of them. And if we're asked to do cultural change, which we're being asked all the time, Oakland needs to not do so much transactional change. They got to do transformative change. You can't transform a culture until the people look at it honestly, what it is. We had a horrible history here. We've done some things that we should not have done. And so we have to change. We're not at war with our community any longer. We want to be a part of it. And so if we want to be a part of it, you can't change the community to be Oakland police officers. But Oakland police officers are getting paid to be part of the community. That's your job. That's your job. That's the oath you took. And so, look, if you're going to start repairing the historical harm, if you want the community to come along with you, they got to see, at least you admit that you need to do some changing. Second point, let's get rid of that brevity stuff. I've been going through these policies about Oakland, and everybody wants to use less words. Let's say what we mean. Make sure everybody understands it at the 5th, 6th grade level. Let's get rid of acronyms and all of that stuff so everybody know what we mean when we say what we mean. If it takes more words, so be it. So be it. So look, such adjustments will repair the historical harm done by policing in Oakland. That is a vital clause. Otherwise, the assumption is we haven't done anything wrong. Everything has been fine. You do what we tell you and everything is fine. I guarantee you that's not the feeling out here in Oakland. It's just not the feeling. I want it to be the feeling that people trust you and respect you, but that's not how they feel. You have to take my word for it, but I thought it was pretty bold to eliminate all of that without even talking to us, without even having it up there. After all the time we put in going back and forth with each other and crafting and wordsmithing this to say what we mean and say we want to go from this to something better. Thank you.
I'm
So,
going
Commissioner,
to.
So yeah, no, point well taken again, Mr. Lyles, and I agree. You know, and I admit there's been historical harm done by police in Oakland. There's no doubt about that, and I agree that a lot of this statement can be put in there. The policies piece, right? So maybe we can work or craft this just a little bit differently. I totally agree about repairing the harm. I totally agree with mitigating, you know, unintended circumstances and practices and procedures to avoid further harm, and definitely any inappropriate practices and procedures. But the policy piece, I think, is the one piece we keep getting hooked up on. I think Commissioner Shea brought up a good point, and I kind of agree with his point on like how that we can kind of change this. But yeah, no, point well taken, Mr. Lyles, and I'm not opposed to putting, we don't have to abbreviate at all or like trim things down. You just got to be very particular with keywords.
Thank you for that, DC Beer. I see, who do I give the last word to? I see Pastor Jackie, but I also see Mariano's hands up. How about you both go and then we'll finish up.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Still in the car, still driving. I think, as I said, my goal is to be able to take a look and make some offerings. I think I just want to ask directly though, just so I can be clear, is there a willingness of the Oakland Police Department to place in writing some kind of acknowledgement of historical harm? Because what I'm hearing is marketing. That's what I'm hearing. I'm hearing a willingness to acknowledge privately and on this call that that's the reality, but not necessarily a willingness to print it and say it. And I think part of the reason it was intentionally included, because one of the first steps of restorative justice or building trust in any community is an acknowledgement of the harm that that community has experienced. And so I am not sure that that is necessarily inappropriate in its placement. But if the reality is that there is an unwillingness to state that formally in writing, we need to know that, so that we don't necessarily spend time spinning our wheels trying to attempt something that's not going to happen. That would be important for me personally. I can't speak for other members of the ad hoc, but I would like to know.
No, I totally agree with you and Mr. Lyles. And I think this statement can be put in here again, just a little bit of maybe wordsmithing with just the policy piece, but I like it. I think it's a very important statement. I think it should be in there. I think when we just, Lieutenant Toribio brought this up, it was just the entire sentence to deal with the policy piece. Again, I think we can definitely get through this together. And 100% it's valid to put in here for the community policing portion of it, because we do teach that there has been historical harm, and we do have to get over, the unintended consequences of what happened in the past, and or even some intended consequences, and how we have to rebuild those bridges of trust. And I totally good with eliminating practices and procedures that cause harm. So again, I'm lockstep with both of you with having this statement back in. Again, it's just the policy piece.
I understood. Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Mariano, last word, and we should move on.
Sure. Yeah, I recommend that we keep it that way, and then we figure it out later. And I just have an aside question for DC Beer. I know that he said he's from Oakland, and I'm really excited and pleased about this Project Reset. Will you mind if I reach out to you aside from this to talk about the history training part of Oakland and relations, as well as also the restorative justice procedures? Because just having that included in there, and I'd like to know what kind of training you're doing with that, because Oakland also has a rich history from the 1990s, where restorative justice actually took root here. And there are people from throughout the country that come and get trained by folks in the school district, out in the community, from first responders to violence interrupters. So I'd like to, if you don't mind, if I could reach out to you and talk to you about this aside from this ad hoc.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, for sure. You and I can have a good conversation. Just full transparency, I've lived in Oakland for almost 30 years now, but I was born in San Francisco. I lived in Ireland for 8 years, and then I moved back. Long story, I can talk to you another time off here. But then when I came back from the Marines, I moved to Oakland. So I've been here in Oakland before I became an Oakland police officer. And I raising 3 boys here. My wife and I live here. But yeah, absolutely. And definitely what I can do is, during our conversations, I can actually link you up with our training staff that can break it out specifically for the details of restorative justice, procedural justice, all the training that comes and goes. And they can give you like the detail and the actual, breakdown of everything. But yeah, please reach out to me. I'll definitely love to talk to you more.
Hey, I was going to follow up on that as well. If it would be possible to get a copy of the Project Reset presentation that you have, that would be great. I'll reach out to you.
Absolutely. And then Lieutenant Toribio, can you just keep that down as a note? I'll write it as a note as well.
To pass the Project Reset info?
Yeah, basically, we'll get a training to give us basically did you want, Commissioner Farmer, I'm sorry, did you want the actual training outline?
Whatever, yeah, I mean, whatever it is that you all train them on, the outline, slideshow, that would be great.
All right, I'll work with
It's going to be
Lieutenant.
applicable to something that I ask you to bring to one of the SSOC meetings anyway. So
Yep, no problem, no problem.
And-
Making a note of that.
And also sources, and I'm sure this is continuing, right?
Oh, yeah, so, yeah, it's continuous, it's going to evolve, and in fact, there's, the most current up-to-date, basically things that are going on in the community are discussed in it as well.
Okay. Sorry, Commissioner Shea.
Jose, is your hand up because you also want the materials or something else? Okay, I don't know. Okay, make that a third person, add Mr. Dorado to it. All right, let's, Lieutenant Toribio, move on to the next section where we have a change, just so that everyone knows. There is a purpose section and a community policing and a purpose section to our policy that has not changed whatsoever. So if that's okay, we'll just skip over it, and everyone can review it again to refresh yourself on the work that we did. Let's go to the community policing and problem solving section, and let's highlight some of the changes that have occurred.
Okay, so looks like one of the changes was there was a footnote, and that footnote was removed, and instead it's made a reference to an appendix. The explanation of Sarah was also moved to an appendix as well. Of note, section 3, which I'm scrolling to here.
And I think I would say that the removal of the footnote and the details of Sarah to the appendix improves the readability of the document. Just as an aside.
Copy that. Okay. Looking at section 3, and I'm looking at the change here. Okay, so verbiage was changed, and let me just confirm with my note here. Okay, no, this is just in Commissioner Shea's noted changes. So there was a section under priority and project review, which read previously, upon completion of responding to a priority, including the closure of a SARA project, the involved CRO should discuss with the relevant neighborhood council. And it presently reads, community resource officers should discuss completion resolution of a community priority, including the closure of a SARA project, with the relevant neighborhood council. So it's easier for everybody, and we don't have to bounce back. I'm gonna copy and paste the old so that you can compare it to what is proposed here.
I will bring out my lawyer card and say that I don't see any change in actual function. I think it was just written in more readable form than what we had previously. But someone tell me if I'm wrong.
No, at least from the department side, rereading it, I think that was my intention, because I don't see content-wise significant difference. I think I got my editor hat on a little too much there.
It's okay. I need the help too. Let's take 10 seconds. Any thoughts? If not, let's move on.
As an older lawyer, I agree with you, Jesse.
Mr. Dorado. You're on mute.
If I'm following this correctly, I'll just read the comment TS5, I guess. So the CRO needs to provide brief oral reports that those subsections were removed to provide brief oral reports along with written reports to the neighborhood council upon completing each step in the SARA process.
We're not there yet.
Okay, well then,
We're not there yet. We'll get there.
Mm.
We're getting there. We're getting there.
reset.
All right. I think Jose wants to get to that section. So why don't we move on?
Okay. Going to the next section of the community resource officers section. There is under general roles a subsection I. This is the verbiage in question, and to make it easier, I'm going to paste the prior verbiage and explain the reason for this recommended change.
While you do that, I'll read it out loud. So the original document said providing foot and bicycle patrols as needed. I think envisioning that CROs might be doing the foot and bicycle patrols. If the current version says coordinating the implementation of foot and bicycle patrols, and I'll let as needed, and I'll let Lieutenant Turbio or someone from the department explain the change.
No, that's exactly it. While there are some community resource officers that are trained on bicycles, not all of them are. And just to clear up that they'd be responsible for coordination, the implementation of foot and bicycle patrols, but they wouldn't necessarily be the ones who were responsible for actually doing like the bicycle patrols. So that was the reason for the change of verbiage here.
And Commissioner, if I could, one of the reasons would be is we have a foot patrol unit now, as well as we have other officers in patrol that are qualified to conduct bicycle and foot patrols. So we don't want to limit it just to the CROs. So the coordination piece would be actually to bring additional resources from outside the CROs to actually assist. So they'd still be responsible to make sure that it's implemented, but they won't be just for CROs. It's actually trying to get more resources to the area that might not necessarily just be limited to the CROs, because like Lieutenant Toribio said, not all of them are bicycle trained as of yet.
My sense is that the goal is getting the foot and bicycle patrol to the places they're needed, period. Is that the sentiment?
Yeah, wherever they're needed, work with the trained officers and the foot patrol unit to get resources allocated to where they need to go for whatever specific project or beat priority or need.
That seems like an improvement to me. Anybody have thoughts? Jose?
Yeah, while yeah, it's a good idea to bring in more resources. I mean, that's a given. But I'd like to see that, in fact, there's an implementation of more foot and bicycle patrols by the CROs. So I'd like to see if, in fact, we just modify the providing foot and bicycle patrols as needed, and just add coordinating and providing foot and bicycle patrols as needed. I don't think that would necessarily eliminate or affect the implementation of bicycle patrols from patrol, for example. But I think that I would like to see more foot and bicycle patrols, particularly bicycle. I mean, I bike, and I think you can, and I don't know how extensive the bicycle training is, but it would seem to me that that would be a real force multiplier in terms of the amount of distance that you can cover. Not to mention that it's a far more friendly way of presenting yourself to the community. I think particularly with younger residents, I think that would be something that they could relate to, since obviously many of them also have bikes. So I would just like to see that we also have we just augment the providing foot and bicycle trails as needed and just add the word coordinating so that it covers both. One, that the CRO is encouraged to walk and also bike and also coordinate others, patrol, for example, to do the same in their beats. Thank you.
Yeah, I agree. We'll make that happen. Lieutenant Toribio, if you can just add that so it encompasses both providing and coordinating the implementation of foot and bicycle patrols.
Yeah, I just had a typo, but I got it.
Mr.
So that
Farmer?
one-
Hey, quick question. Do you all still have the mounted horse patrol, or have you gotten rid of that? Just transferred
No.
all those people back to foot patrol?
Yeah, no, they actually, so the mounted patrol, the horses unit was staffed by reserves. And then years and years ago, I believe there was 2 officers assigned to it. Those positions have since been eliminated. And then when they did do away with those 2 officer positions, they were being taken care of as an auxiliary assignment by other officers. And it was not necessarily for patrol, but more of like community events. And it hasn't been staffed. And to the most recent knowledge that I have is I don't even believe we have the horses anymore. I could be incorrect. Lieutenant Toribio, do we still have the horse stables with horses in them?
I don't know. I know they were moved from the barn by the lake to somewhere on Skyline, but I don't even know if we have horses anymore.
Yeah, I know there's no officers assigned to them, and they're not utilized for patrol.
Okay, got it. Yeah, the last time I had heard about it was when former Chief Kirkpatrick reactivated it during the late part of her term. And they said that up to 10 officers were stationed there. So I was just curious to see if that's still in use or not, or hopefully disbanded. It sounds like it's disbanded, so that's good. Thanks.
Yes, Commissioner Farmer.
Did not think we would be talking about horses today. All right, let's go to the next thing.
Yep. Moving on, going down to section 3. There was an addition here, and it's commented. So I'll highlight it for so it's easy to read. But I added this, and this is just to cover and to have kind of a clause if we move away from the SARANET database. So this talks about documenting projects in the SARANET database, but as we all know, technology changes. We may find something better in the future. So we added this line. However, as technologies and project management software and databases evolve, the means of creating and tracking projects may change. So maybe superfluous, I don't know, but I just felt compelled to add that in. Any issues with that added verbiage?
I don't see the pitchfork, so why don't we keep moving?
Okay. Another change just here in section D. I just changed it from SARA to SARANET, just to more accurately use the appropriate terminology. Section E.
Second sentence.
Second sentence, yes. Added this sentence here. Any issues with this verbiage being included? So the full sentence, for those who can't read the policy because they're not in front of a computer, it says maintain at least one project centered on a neighborhood council priority per assigned beat. CROs are allowed to overlap beat projects as needed.
What is the practical effect of that additional sentence? Can someone help us?
I can actually add to that. So as our numbers decrease, the staffing levels amongst the CROs as well as other units throughout the department may also decrease. And if that's the case, we still want to have one project centered on the neighborhood council priorities, but the CROs will have to mutually support each other to make that happen. So there's a possibility that overlap beat projects might occur. And we're actually already seeing staffing challenges right now. And I know Commissioner Farmer and some other commissioners, that's kind of like, it's highlighted on their radars as well. But, as our numbers, and again, the budget's going to pass, and I can't comment on the budget, but, our authorized strength's it's going to go lower, either 710 or 712. Again, I can't comment on it because I'm not part of it, but right now we're 741. So, it's a significant number of officers. So if we're not able to fully staff the CROs, which we're not right now, we have to have the ability for them to support each other. Is that what you're thinking, Lieutenant Trivia?
Yeah, I think it was, it's a staffing thing with this, stating that there has to be a project centered on a neighborhood council priority per beat. If there aren't the personnel in order to staff each beat, then there could be overlap with among CROs, distribution among CROs. So I don't know if this is worded correctly or not.
So let me I don't read it that way. And
Okay.
so let me tell you how I read it. Let's see. For each beat that a CRO is assigned to, they have to have one of their many projects be a neighborhood council priority. The word overlap beat projects, that means to me that you might have the same project for, say, maybe 3 beats that are close to each other. That's
Yeah.
how I read it.
No, you're 100% correct. And I think the reason being is because we're so short-staffed, the CROs they're assigned multiple beats, right? So you have one CRO that might be assigned to 3, 5, and 7 per se. So he might pick a project that the neighborhood council is a priority, but it could affect all 3 beats. So like an example of that might be like burglary issues or even, would be another one like abandoned vehicles related to an unsheltered encampment area that could actually encompass 2 beats. So instead of just being like, say, beat 19, it would be beat 19 and 18, but we'd have to pull in other CROs to kind of help them. Yeah, we could probably change the verbiage. However, you think that might better suit that, I guess.
We have our the channel of resident CRO experts, Sergeant Manguy.
Hello, yeah, so I agree on this. Each beat can also be subdivided into its own subsection. So 13, beat 13 has 13 X-ray, zebra, and yellow. So that's 3 different groups that a CRO might be expected to answer to. And then there are also just separate beats altogether. So there are some CROs that have 3 beats that are not subdivided, but within themselves are subdivided. So there might be a CRO that has beats 2, 5, 7, and within those beats there will also be subdivision like 7X, 7Y, etc. So we need to be able to articulate this where it's not quantity versus quality, which is what this is kind of pointing to right now. Like, we got to be able to use the resources we have, which is limited, unfortunately, due to staffing. So this kind of gets brought up a couple of times within the document. I do like the priorities have a minimum of 1 priority, or it's like 1 to 3 priorities per beat. But then now enforcing an actual SARA project might be untenable.
So help me out let me flesh this out a little bit so I can understand. Let's assume that you are one of those CROs who has 3 beats, and each of those beats has subdivisions, right? Let's say 3 each. That sounds like maybe 9 groups, potentially 9 neighborhood councils that you might be assigned to. If you didn't have the second sentence, that kind of sounds like you might need to have 9 separate unique projects.
So that's how I
that
read it. Yeah, that's how I read it. But Manguy, if you can confirm or dispel my thoughts on that, because that's how it read. That's how I was reading this here. You have multiple beats. You're required to have an NCP priority as a project. And the intention, at least when I wrote this, was that, okay, you have, let's say, beat 31 or beat 13, X-ray, yellow, and zebra. You can have one for 13 just because of the inability to adequately work on multiple projects, because this is just one component of the projects that the CROs are going to have, is an NCP or a neighborhood council priority. And so this verbiage, what I was hoping was it would allow, if they have this staffing issue and they're covering multiple beats, that they can designate like one priority for the mother beat, I guess. So for like all of 13, and they can overlap X, Y, and Z versus having 3 separate ones. Am I off base on that, man guy?
No, that's what the issue we're running into. And then it just exasperates as you have separate beats that are subdivided all on one CRO. So then it's even more, there's a higher expectation that they're not gonna be able to meet.
2 questions, and then I'll take Jose. The first is, what is the number of Sarah projects where it gets untenable? Maybe like, let's say the average.
Well, technically a CRO should have at least 1 beat project per beat as of now. It depends, like again, the quality versus quantity situation. It might be like the Wood Street encampment or something in that manner, where all hands on deck, all resources for the CROs are going to be working on that sole project until it's done. And it could be a small project, such as, okay, there's a nuisance residence here, and it's just a matter of working with our neighborhood law corps to try to address that. So it's kind of, it depends. That's what I'm trying to say.
Sure. And then the second question is, to the extent that a CRO is assigned to multiple beats, are those beats generally near each other, or can they be really far apart?
We try to maintain near each other, at least within the same district.
Okay. Jose?
Yeah, are not the 35 OPD beats still what OPD uses for its beat assigning purposes?
We do, but we do not have 35 CROs to fill
No,
those.
no, I understand that. I'm just wondering if the 35 beats still exist, if that structure still exists. For example, 13 X, Y, and Z, then they're considered one beat, and they would be then under this language, they would then generate one priority that then would be addressed by the CRO. So I'm struggling with the intent that the CRO is allowed to overlap beat projects as needed. So I wouldn't see any conflict if, in fact, like in my case, I have a CRO, Officer Sumter. He's also assigned to Melrose. I'm 28X there in Maxwell Park, and 27X is right below me, Melrose. So let's just say, if I'm understanding this right, if CR is allowed to overlap beat projects, if we had a string of abandoned vehicles along Brookdale, which is the dividing line between 28X and 27X, and if both our councils, 27X and 28X, said, yeah, we want that to be a priority, then I could see where there could be an overlap, and I don't think anybody would be unhappy with that. So I'm struggling with what other examples there might be where you have overlapping beat projects, and what the intent is of that language.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
So there is a listing of the neighborhood council meetings that we have on the City of Oakland website. And you'll see that there are separate neighborhood council meetings for subsections of beats. So like 13X, 13 Zebra have their own neighborhood council meetings. And then within those meetings, they will have their own priorities and SARA projects that they can request to have made.
So that's where the complication comes in. In terms of priorities for each beat. So this is actually not probably it should be clarified that it's not for, it's for assigned beat. Well, I don't want to get too much into the weeds, but it probably needs to be clarified or at least understood that when we talk about beat, we're talking about every beat that is identified. For example, 13X. That's an identified beat. 13Y, 13Z. It's an identified beat as opposed to the OPD structure of grouping those all together and in one beat. So
Here's,
that probably should
here's
be clarified in some way.
I'll take a point of privilege to point out what I imagine is or be devil's advocate. Three numbers, right? Each having 3 subdivisions would be 9 different neighborhood councils per assigned beat. What happens in a situation where all 9 neighborhood council priorities are completely different and there are no overlapped beats projects?
I think that was at least my intention of adding this line that clearly is not putting the message.
Sorry, what I mean is not so much the overlap, but what if there are no shared neighborhood council priorities among those 9 neighborhood councils? Does that mean that the CRO needs to have 9 projects because there's no way they could overlap?
No, what we would do then at that point was we'd have to triage it, right? So we would look at the crime data and specifically see which one's causing the more severe. It would go to like preservation of life, prevention of violent crime. And we wouldn't say no, we wouldn't get to all 9 of them, but we would have to prioritize which one is creating more of a threat to the general public. And then that's how it gets prioritized. Is that correct, Sir Manguy?
Yes, sir. I can also see what's being said on regarding, hey, what if there's just no overlap? So even with that, so let's say that there's the 9 different priorities that are set for us, and then none of them overlap at all. Should we write something in this document that allows us to do that triage and not force us to open up a SARA project on a beat that does not overlap with anybody else?
Here's my last question, and then I'll take Lieutenant Febble. You treat the subdivisions of each beat as a separate beat, or just the number, the whole thing?
It's the subdivisions. So kind of looking at the city council or the neighborhood council meeting schedule that's set up on the website, you'll see that there are different neighborhood councils. Some of them run by solely community members, and also some of them for businesses.
So then the 35 beats is actually not 35 beats, but a lot more.
Yes, sir.
Lieutenant Febble, or sorry, Mariano, Lieutenant Febble. I don't know who was first.
Yeah, I just want to make a comment on, I can appreciate it. So the intention of police, community policing is to, alleviate and empower the community to do some of their own public safety and get some results. And I can appreciate the statements and the fact that OPD is understaffed, not are below the desired number of officers, sworn officers. But I also see this as a very unique opportunity to to look at using the community, using residents, as well as using what's in existence right now, and that's MACRO, the Mobile Assistance Community Responders of Oakland. And that is primarily to, free up low-level crime, from police officers from responding. So, I just want to, I know that during our discussion the many months prior, we mentioned MACRO, but we didn't really, incorporate it in as a possibility into this. And I'm just hoping that, if not in the actual policy, that OPD or those officers that are present, that keep that in mind, that, that's there and that's a possibility, and it should be used. Thank you.
We did put it into the policy. It's under 3L. Anyway, Lieutenant Feble.
So I'm glad that everybody brought up the priorities and the fact that CROs with overlapping beats will get significantly more work. When Measure Y was originally developed, it's the one that prescribed priorities as well as projects. And the intent of Measure Y was that officers are required for one NC to have one project annually, and that's the project that is comprehensive and goes through the SARA process. The priorities were such that the community would be able to identify issues outside of the project, which is highly comprehensive, time intensive for the CRO, but they could still get some optional issues through the CRO accomplished. And the distinct difference is that projects are required. They have to report out on projects. Priorities are not required. They're options, and it's the CRO's best intent to get to those, but they're not necessarily held accountable for those. And also to know that priorities are not necessarily even applicable to the CRO. They could belong to DOT, they could belong to the unhoused unit. But most importantly is the project. So they're required to do one project per NC per year. So if you figure every beat has nearly 2 NCs, and some in fact even have 3 NCs, a CRO to have 3 projects alone is an incredibly intensive amount of work. And then you multiply that by the desire of the community to have an additional 9 optional priorities. And we could see very quickly where you have 8 CROs in East Oakland spread out over 15 beats, that if we create a policy that requires them to manage all these things, it's untenable. So we have to consider that moving forward.
Jose.
Yeah, I think that DC Beer came up with the word that needs to be inserted, and that is the CRO is allowed to triage as opposed to overlap the projects as needed. So certainly, if you've got priorities that are a real serious public safety issue, certainly they're going to, they can and should be over, abandoned vehicles, for example. So I think allowing that kind of flexibility, using that word, I think accomplishes what we want. And that is that at least in my opinion, that there should be at least one priority per beat. And that includes 13X, Y, and Z. But where is needed, there's those, if it's untenable, if there's nine beats with 9 completely separate and not overlapping issues, projects, I should say, or priorities is a better word, then the flexibility with that word of triage allows that to happen. There can be a priority of these priorities established based on the seriousness of the issue of the priority. Thank you.
I like that. Yeah, because then nothing gets lost or not. Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Thanks, Commissioner Dorado. I think it's a good suggestion.
What's the practical effect of suggesting that there should be a. Never mind. Mr. Farmer?
I just want to clarify something that I thought I heard someone say. There are 35 beats. You just have some that are bigger than others, correct? For OPD?
Yes, and there are also some beats that are divided into sub beats. For example, 13 is divided into 3, a 13X, 13Y, 13Z. There's a 3X, there's a 3Y. And so in each sub beat, for lack of a better phrase, has its own neighborhood council. Hence the concern of not only some CROs being assigned to multiple mother beats, I guess, but also the sub beats that are incorporated in them. And then that being overwhelming when it comes to taking a priority in making it a project.
Yeah, no, I understand that. I mean, there's also 32 X and Y. There's, there's a bunch of beats that are subdivided into multiple NCPCs, 22X, 22Y, it goes on and on. So I just wanted to clarify that about the beats. Thank you.
Okay.
Let's put that one on the drawing board and work with it, Lieutenant Toribio. Let's get to the next one.
Okay. Made some notes and to be worked.
I'm going to put us at a hard stop at 8.
Okay.
I thought that we might be able to get through, but let's just, this is valuable discussion.
Section F. Report on the progress of neighborhood council priorities. I believe that, sorry. I believe that, I'm sorry?
You added the
the
last clause.
So this was the I believe that this was the verbiage of the original, what I just highlighted. It's gray on my screen. Hopefully it's gray on yours. And it just elaborated a bit more and added this by presenting reports of the progress of each neighborhood council priority neighborhood council at neighborhood council meetings to the extent possible. So it just provided clarified a means or a way by which reporting of the progress would be done.
There was a little bit more. Sorry, the way I wrote the notes changes was weird. Yes, that was added, but there were 2 subsections here.
Okay.
Originally, one said presenting brief oral reports on the progress of each neighborhood council priority at neighborhood council meetings to the extent possible, which I think is captured here because being more vague, it could go either way. But then the second subsection was submitting written reports to the sponsoring neighborhood council immediately upon completion of each step in the SARA process to the extent possible. These reports may be submitted to the neighborhood council chair or vice chair, and a copy provided to the associated neighborhood service coordinator to include in the neighborhood council's next meeting.
Thanks. I just I didn't scroll down far enough, and I have it here in my comment, which hopefully you guys can see. So the reason, the thinking behind removing those subsections was more to leave it upon the CRO and the specific neighborhood council to determine the best way into which that reporting would be done, and to not perhaps beat 1 wants it done a certain way based on the people in beat 1, and beat 2 wants it different, beat 3 wants it different. So that's the reason for that removal, was to leave it more for the CROs to have the freedom to report to their NCs in the way that they best determine that to be done. Thoughts on that?
Lieutenant Feble, I think you had your hand up first.
So I certainly agree with Lieutenant Toribio. Another issue that I've seen, over 10 years in dealing with citywide community meetings is that we have found that two things erode the level of the NCPC, which is the foundation of the CRO program, is the direct communication to the community in these public forums. Is that when we have private meetings or we push out all of this separate doctrine, is we see a significant erosion of people showing up to these meetings. And you'll see that some NCPCs sadly only have 5 participants and some have 45 participants. And the CRO participating in an in-person forum with the option of Zoom, of course, which we do, allows them to present an aggregate of work and information and accomplishments in a single forum to the community, as opposed to just giving them little stepping stones as to the end product. And I found that really that I know it has great intent on pushing out information more immediately, but it actually really erodes the system, which is why I'm not for that.
Jose, did you have your hand up? Yeah.
Yeah, with all due respect to Lieutenant Febble, I disagree. I think that in fact, having this, and I'm very strong on this concept of having the CRO report at the completion of each step in real time as being a cornerstone of what can be really accomplished. And certainly if there's any number of beats, any beat that says, no, just send us a sentence of what the scan was. And that's good. We're good with that. But what I don't want to see is that the opposite, where after an inordinate amount of time, there's a report that on a project that's of importance to a neighborhood council, and that's why it became a priority, to be summarized by the CRO, the entire SARA project in a matter of a few minutes. So I think it's important, I think it's critical that this procedure be implemented where the CRO is an integral part, not just of reporting back at the completion of each step, but also an integral part of the development of a priority. What is a priority? How does it get written up according to SMART principles, et cetera? I think the CRO should be part and parcel of that, but also once it's given to him or her, that they understand that they'll be reporting back at regular intervals, and those intervals represent the completion of each of the 4 steps. And certainly they have at any point after the assessment, the last step of summarizing the entire project or priority at a subsequent NC meeting. But in the meantime, I think it's incumbent upon, I should be incumbent upon the CRO to take these steps very seriously, that they do in fact go and see what in fact they've seen in the scan, that they in fact see what kind of resources are available in the analysis step, and how does that relate to the development of the response, and of course the assessment. So I think there's just not only a critical part of the community policing program as I'd like to see it, but also I think this really is a key point, a key part of the interplay and the trust building between the CRO and the neighborhood councils, the residents, because you're going to have a joint process from start to finish. Thank you.
No, Mr. Dorado, I certainly agree with you that the CROs need to be very competent and understand that they need to report out at every NC meeting the progress to include all the steps taken in the process of the SARANET model. The reason why I'm passionate about the in-public report out of information is twofold. Is number one, it gives the public immediate feedback on the progress of the project and if any deviation needs to be made according to their values in implementing that project. And secondarily, much like the Brown Act, is that these decisions and progress, they need to be pushed out in public forum so that when the CRO reports out, everybody in the community, including the NC neighborhood, has the ability to attend and have input on that project and its progress and its future interactions and how they're going to attempt to succeed. So I absolutely agree. I think that we should mandate in the policy that the CRO should report out at the NC meetings. And I also acknowledge that some NCs meet monthly and some meet quarterly, but it is up to the NC to determine how many meetings they want. So they can determine essentially how much information the CRO reports out at their own request. I think that should accomplish both of our goals here.
If I may,
not-
and I'm
Go-
sorry,
Go for
Commissioner.
it. Go for it.
So again, I think the intent here was to not discourage the reporting of progress or anything like that. I think the intent in my edit was to allow for the manner in which that progress is reported to be determined by the CRO and the specific NC. So I kind of typed out what I think clears that up. And I think we can keep the language that I deleted as it being optional or like suggested ways in which that information can be reported. However, I do think it's important that there is some flexibility so that CROs can work in like unique ways with their respective NCs, and each one may be different. So we list, hey, you can give an oral report, you can give a written report, et cetera, but I do think it's better if there's more freedom for each neighborhood council and CRO to find kind of their own way in doing it.
Let's put a pin on this. It is 7:57. I had many more questions about this particular point, but I think it'd be best to take these 3 minutes to perhaps discuss next steps. Let's see. We are all on the same email chain. Everyone, I think, has each other's email address at this point because we're all on the same email chain. I would encourage, if you have any additional thoughts or suggestions on any of the changes or the on the changes, to email the group or email Lieutenant Toribio. I think Lieutenant Toribio does a great job of logging those suggestions and as discussion points for our next meeting. The more we can do offline would be great. I want to take everyone's temperature. How are these Thursdays? They're off commission meetings. Thursdays work okay? Anyone have significant conflicts?
Commissioner, I just want to point out, going forward, Lieutenant Thompson will be back and he'll be filling in for my role. I just wanted to really do the introduction and be part of it. I might join in future meetings, but at the next meeting, more than likely I'll be out of the country, but Lieutenant Thompson will be carrying forward.
Always welcome. Okay. Back to Thursday. So I am looking at either the 20, God, what month are we in? The June 29th or July 6th. Thoughts?
I go for July 6th. I'm going to be out of town on the 29th.
For Toribio, July 6th is fine. The other date also works, so whatever the majority is here, I'm good.
Do we have a commission meeting on that 6th?
We do not.
Okay.
Sergeant Manguy, July 6th is fine if you still need me.
Always welcome. Very much appreciate your expertise and knowledge.
Unfortunately, I have the privacy committee on the 6th, but I'm sure you all do great. Thank you, everyone.
Let me just double check one thing, that there isn't some other commission ad hoc scheduled on the 6th.
You going back to Ireland, DC Beer?
No, actually, unfortunately, I was back there last month, but I only stayed 2 days. I was back there for a funeral. My uncle passed away, but I'm going on a trip with my wife and boys. My son's graduating, so he's heading off to SDSU. My middle son's staying at Skyline, and my little guy's still in grammar school. So because it's his last trip, basically, we're going to go to Taiwan, Vietnam, and Thailand, then come back.
Nice. Enjoy.
Thank you, sir.
Let me know if you need recommendations for Taiwan. All right, July 6th looks clear. July 6th, 6 p.m. I'm gonna keep it a soft 1.5 hour to 2 hour meeting. Hope for the best, but plan for the not the worst even. This is all very valuable discussion. Thank you all for your time. Again, if you have thoughts or comments on the changes that have been highlighted, please send them to the email chain or to Lieutenant Toribio. And let's get this to be the best document that we can. Much appreciated, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.
Have a good night.